Did you know that if you look real closely on the giant golden bill of Shandora, you'll see a monkey, but not just any monkey, a monkey with a straw hat. I know that gave me chills down my spine, goosebumps, especially since it was Monkey D. Luffy who rang the bell during Skypiea. You see, when I discovered this groundbreaking detail hidden in plain sight, I thought to myself, was this awesome crazy coincidence? Or what are the chances that whoever created the bell in the ancient past knew that Straw Hat Luffy, or in other words Joyboy, would one day strike the bell of Shandora? And now that I've gathered your attention, keep this in the back of your mind for now until the end of the video, because it will all make sense soon enough as I show you how Oda has already told us how the One Piece story ends. And this video is going to contain massive spoilers to the end of One Piece, spoilers to the entire history and importance of the Monkey D family. But hold on, before I get ahead of myself, we have to start out from the very beginning, because after rereading Skypiea and researching the Monkey D family for months, I think I've discovered the truth about Luffy's ancestors. Today I'll tell you why the Monkey D family is the most feared, most powerful, and most important family in the entire One Piece world. I'll explain their connection to the former Joyboy, and I'll tell you why they are worshipped by Shandora. I'll reveal how Dragon's goals are tied to Luffy's, the revolutionary and the future pirate king. I'll reveal many secrets on the Will of D. I'll reveal Oda's entire inspiration and plan for these two characters, so stick around to the end of the video to have your mind blown as I reveal everything there's to know about Luffy and his infamous Monkey D family. Let's start out with the basics. What do we already know about the Will of D and its cryptic meaning? The most crucial and important information we have on the middle initial D is that it's being passed on and that those of the D clan oppose the gods or the celestial dragon, whether because of a fated future or an ancient history, or maybe a bit of both. This makes the Will of D members and the celestial dragon's natural enemy. Even Imu states how the D clan were once the past enemy of the celestial dragons, referring to the Void Century time. But the most mysterious thing that Imu tells us is that the current D members don't know the meaning of the initial or the importance it holds. This is strange and implies that Imu and the celestial dragons wiped out the D clan during a Void Century in some kind of war. I mean, even Lily, Cobra, and the Nefertatis don't know the meaning of the D, which is also strange, but we'll come back to this later in the video because it'll all lead us into the theory that the Monkey D family is the only remaining family of the D clan who have existed since the Void Century. So yeah, it'll all make sense, but just keep it in the back of your mind for now. Essentially, whatever the D represents, it's been suppressed. It's been erased just like Sun God Nikafru has been erased from the world. Celestial Dragon translates to heavenly gods, with celestial relating to heavens and dragons being the closest thing to gods according to Oda, because he mentions this in the opening page of One Piece Volume 13. He also asks, I wonder what would happen if you eat them. Now this is kind of a separate idea, but I always wondered, is it possible that celestial dragons actually ate the dragons during the Void Century as some kind of ritual, which allowed them, at least in their mind, to become gods? I mean, dragons seem to have gone extinct in the One Piece world, and considering that ancient giants like Zunisha, Sea Kings, and Poseidon all seem to be tied to the ancient kingdom and Joyboy, it makes me believe that dragons were once also tamed by the D clan and allies of them as well. We know celestial dragons had heavy fascination in dragons as well, as Brownbeard mentions this during the Punk Hazard arc. So I think it would be really cool if Monkey D Dragon actually found one of the remaining dragons from the Void Century that survived the celestial dragon's extinction, since we know these giant creatures like Zunisha and the Sea Kings can live for hundreds of years. Or maybe that giant egg on Roger's ship actually was a dragon, and Monkey D Dragon found it years later. And we actually have an entire separate theory on this as well, where we explain how Dragon found Uranus, which was in this egg. So I'll leave that video in the description if you're interested. Now going back to the D clan, we also know that the D clan members are feared by celestial dragons and are raised to fear them. I believe this has to do with a prophecy that the D will always bring a storm, and that this storm will destroy the celestial dragons. And trust me, this storm prophecy is much more important than we ever imagined, because I think I finally deciphered this storm phrase and its importance to the One Piece story, which predicts the events of the end of One Piece. But before you understand what that means, we have to analyze each of the Monkey family members one by one, and show how important each one of them is to the end of One Piece and the Will of D as a whole. We're also going to be focusing heavily on Dragon here, and he's arguably just as important to this entire theory as Luffy. But before that, if you could quickly leave a like, it really helps the video. We need your help to reach our goal of 2,000 likes on this video, and I have full faith that we'll reach it. The Monkey family is just built different. Of course, from a physical perspective, Garp's name is literally Garp D. Fist, one of the greatest nicknames in fiction. His upper body is that of a monstrous man, and he once went toe-to-toe with Goldie Roger and other legendary pirates in his younger days. He's arguably the greatest marine to ever live, and you may call it his nature being passed down to the Monkey D family and the D clan, but he despises the celestial dragon Dragons, and this was the main reason he would not rise to the Admiral ranks, because he hated the thought of even serving directly under them. Personality-wise, Garp is a completely insane person. Garp does what he wants when he wants, and has the mindset of a true Giga Chad. If Garp wants to do something, no one is going to tell him no. And so if he really wants the demise of the Celestial Dragons that he's been holding on to deep down for decades, what happens when these deep-rooted feelings rise? Well, keep that in mind, because I believe Garp will aid in the downfall of the Celestial Dragons, despite being a Marine. And that's because Dragon specifically reminds us how the Revolutionaries Army's enemy is the Celestial Dragon and not the Marines. If Garp is a Sword member, or someone who is the inspiration for Sword as a free-spirited Marine, Garp could go down as not only the greatest Marine ever, but someone who sparks a civil war and true change with his influence and inspiration. Garp was said to be one of the big motivating reasons that people are so excited to join the Marines. They truly look up to him as a hero, and I believe that many people within the Marines will follow his lead, like Smoker, Kobe, and many others. And this is Garp's role in the final saga, as a D member and someone who will go down in history as an extremely pivotal factor in the change the world sees. He is the one man with the sway to add fuel to Dragon's revolution. And speaking of Dragon is also built different. Sure, he's a booger-picking nose digger, but I think most people will agree that Dragon is likely a top 5 strongest character in One Piece, at least in the current timeline. And that's a fair assumption to make, since after all, he's related to both Garp and Luffy, who are both truly superhuman. Dragon, just like Garp, despises the Celestial Dragon rule, and even goes a step further to carry on Ohara's will and start an army that will lead a revolution which directly opposes them. He didn't sell his soul to the world government like Vegapunk. Instead, only someone with Dragon's willpower, dedication, patience, and perseverance could do what Dragon made his entire life's goal about. A man on a mission with the bigger picture always in the back of his mind like he's Lil Baby. A man who's ready to face the entire world. He started with the freedom fighters, but he's now made his life's work a revolution, to dive headfirst into a war with the Celestial Dragons. And even though Dragon once stated that he hates war, the Celestial Dragons are a group that's angered him to the point of no return. And I just love how it was most likely Celestial Dragons who made him change his perspective on war, making them the exception to his personal feelings. Is Dragon a hypocrite? It's possible, but even more possible that he has changed a lot throughout the years, and discovered the true horrors of the Void Century and many disgusting truths about the Celestial Dragons and their corrupted power. It's more likely that he's disgusted by the corruption, deception, and lies. And now we know that Dragon's instincts and intuition is right, because according to his right-hand man, Sabo, the Gorosei and Imu are demons, with a demonic and evil aura, a sinister energy, with Sabo even describing these shadows who run the world as hell at the top of the world. After all, Ivankov states how he believes Imu is an immortal being, with all this information like the information on the Holy Knights, and Sabo now knowing the truth about Imu and the Gorosei, this is all leading to a revolution that will change the entire world. Sabo may be the face of this militarized movement, but Dragon is the revolution itself. He's the core of the entire organization. We've already seen Shanks, but I'm so excited for Dragon, since Oda once stated that if he had to make a side series of any character, it would be on Garp or Dragon's life. It implies Oda already has an interesting story to tell for both these characters, most likely including their past and their backstories, their own hero journeys, and I'd love to see Garp's rise through the Marines, but for Dragon, I'd love to see what drove him completely off the deep end, because with Garp, it's amazing how we could see God Valley and Roger and Whitebeard, Rocksteady, Zebek, but with Dragon and how insane his goal and drive is, I feel like this guy had to have some truly traumatizing moments for him to abandon Luffy and to become the world's worst criminal, and showing the world a glimpse of change. Maybe Luffy's mother or Dragon's mother is involved in a tragedy that impacts both Garp and Dragon to hate the Celestial Dragons. Obviously, this idea is all speculation, but it is very mysterious that we've never even heard of Luffy's mother once in the entire story, and if she is dead, that would explain a lot, since no one ever really brings her up, as she's someone who's already passed in a tragic event. It's different with Dragon, as Garp tells Luffy about his father at Water 7 because he's still alive. Dragon, more than anyone, believes in inherited will, as he is introduced with a Goldie Roger quote speaking on freedom, inherited will, and dreams. These things cannot be stopped. Inherited will, one's dreams, the ebb and flow of the ages. As long as people hunger for freedom, these things cannot be stopped. Remember how I mentioned how I believe there's a prophecy that the D-Clan will eventually defeat the Celestial Dragons? Well, this aligns with this quote. Inherited will, or the will of D, being passed on for generations, which continues the will to face the gods. Then there's dreams. Dreams to become the Pirate King. Dreams to create a revolution. Luffy and Dragon's dreams directly opposing the world government. The prophecy being only a matter of time before the day comes, and all of this is leading to what Luffy and Dragon both want most: freedom. freedom. And that's why at the very end of this quote, Dragon says, "A pirate, eh? Not a bad idea," in reference to his son Luffy. And remember earlier I specifically stated that this prophecy states that the D will bring a storm. Well, this storm is something that's been referenced time and time again. Corazon explains to Law how every time a new D rises out the shadows out of history, an elderly celestial dragon at Marijoa says the same saying: the D will always cause another storm. Or in some translations, the D will bring a storm. Now you may be wondering, well, why is this so important? Why does it matter so much when we're talking about Dragon? And why has it been passed on with other D myths, like the myth that the evil D members will eat the kids if they misbehave? Well, what if I told you this is all so important? What if I told you that Dragon himself is the storm, his revolution being the very storm the celestial dragons fear? So we should really start calling him Dragon the Storm at this point. Just like Luffy is a prophetic figure in his own right as the new Joyboy, someone who was predicted and prophesied by the Shandorans to return and ring the bell. I believe Dragon represents the storm, and this is where you can see that that monkey on that golden bell with a straw hat is so key to this theory, as it may just be another Easter egg, but as Rayleigh says, there's no coincidence in this world. Now do you see why I believe that Dragon is the storm? Well, it gets even better, because for decades people have been theorizing that Dragon would have some kind of wind or Logia based fruit, maybe even a mythical creature who's tied to these elements. Essentially, the theory stems from the idea that it was Dragon who created the lightning at Logtown, saving Luffy from being executed. Sanji even asked Zoro, "Do you believe in God?" because of how insanely lucky this was. Even Luffy acknowledging his luck. We know the Dragon was there at Logtown, so it's extremely likely he'd save his own son, and that this is the luck that Dragon was referring to, as he was extremely lucky that Dragon was nearby during this arc, instead of natural lightning saving his life. It's interesting because if this is true, it means that he's been keeping tabs on Luffy since he knew lightning wouldn't hurt Luffy since he's rubber. He may have asked Garp or Shanks about Luffy at some point in the past, learning about him eating the Nika fruit. But I think you see where I'm going with this. Dragon himself is the storm in both the literal and metaphorical sense. I believe Dragon possesses the storm fruit, or at least something that fully gives him the power of storms, where he can literally become the storm itself, fully embodying the godly power, and this would be a completely broken fruit, either a mythical zone or a special Logia. Smoker says that the last time he saw Dragon was at Lawtown during Roger's execution, where he disappeared into thin air like lightning.
あのタロフは何だ22年前ゴールド・ロジャーが処刑されたその同じ日に稲妻のように現れ
But in the anime, they make it much more obvious that these winds, these small tornadoes, are Dragon's power. When Dragon goes back to his hometown and saves Sabo, he put out a fire with wind. And in the manga during Lawtown, we see him targeting the wind specifically at Marines, allowing Luffy to escape. It's almost as he literally and symbolically is bringing a storm with him wherever he goes. What do you think Dragon's devil fruit is? Personally, I'm going with the storm fruit, the ultimate Logia. Many elements in one: rain, water, windy gusts, ice, hail, snow, tornadoes, lightning. This really isn't all that crazy when you think about Big Mom doing these types of things with Prometheus and Hera, and even Kaido having fire blast, lightning, dragon twisters, tornadoes, and flame clouds. And I like to think that Dragon's signature move, or at least one of them, would be something playing around the theme of Dragon Twister, since, well, he's Dragon, but he can also create these tornadoes. And Dragon may not be a Yonko, but his power will be that of a Yonko as the father of Luffy. And so when the Celestial Dragons say that the D will bring a storm, what a better way for Dragon to arrive at Marijoa than with a giant storm, striking fear into the hearts of all Celestial Dragons as they cry in fear at this day of godly reckoning, especially since the Celestial Dragons have been shown to be extremely superstitious. The prophecy is so known, and this will make it where Dragon is really the key to Celestial Dragon's downfall. We already can see this through the revolution, but this story is becoming even more grand in scale since tying back to the theme of inherited will. This storm has been building up for hundreds of years, and it's finally ready to be unleashed. The storm is a symbol of all those D members who have come before him, everyone in the world who's dealt with pain, slavery, suffering, and the horrible effects of the world government's rule. And this is the real reason Oda is saving Dragon for the end game of One Piece. If you ever seen Dragon Ball, you'll know that when they summon the dragon, giant dark clouds surround the world. And this is because Shenlong is inspired by a dragon who was known for storms, and I can't think of a more badass way that Dragon can enter whenever we see him. We already saw this happen both times in Lawtown during Roger's execution and and during Lawtown, where a dark storm comes in as Dragon enters, and it could be something so terrifying with lightning shooting straight out the sky and targeting specific enemies. I just cannot wait to see Dragon go all out for the first time, as his Logia power may be able to change the entire weather and environment into a giant powerful storm. All of this puts Dragon's significance as a D member up there with the likes of even Joyboy himself. And speaking of Luffy, let's jump into his character. Luffy is someone who, just like his father and grandfather, despises celestial dragon. When we talk about being built different, Luffy is the ultimate example. He's speedrunning the new world. He's already surpassed Kaido at least solely in terms of haki. He's also mastered his devil fruit, awakening it, and as far as physically, he's the toughest teenager the One Piece world has ever seen. Despite Luffy only being 19, he's already liberated multiple nations from corruption and piracy, and he's already become a Yonko. To put in perspective, Shanks was still in his 30s when he earned that title as an emperor. Luffy is now strong enough to defeat 99% of the One Piece verse with ease, and his story isn't even over yet. And while we haven't seen it yet, Straw Hat Luffy or Joyboy is the future pirate king. Luffy has always clearly been a superhuman after being raised alongside Ace with his grandfather Garp, but his mind has also grown into that of a true king, someone who speaks his mind no matter what the circumstance is, someone who shows no fear against the most powerful and evil pirates like Big Mom and Kaido. If he sees something is wrong, he'll do what he can to change it and deal with the consequences after. He's happy and joyful when things are as he believes they should be, and so Luffy's spirit is truly unbreakable, as this was the entire point of his battle with Kaido. Someone who never gives up, someone who always bounces back, a symbol that people believe in because he creates miracles time and time again doing the impossible. In Wano it's revealed that Luffy is Joyboy, an actual sun god, and the warrior of liberation who's been erased from history by the world government. Many of the celestial dragons like Charlos are weak, gross, and pathetic people. These are people who have no physical authority to act this way. For someone like Luffy or Garp, it's their natural instinct to fight people if they disagree with them. And Luffy's made it clear that the thing he hates the most is cowards. Ever since he was a child, he hated Shanks when he thought that he was a coward, all those mountain boundings to spit on him and disrespect him. He hated Kobe because of how much of a crybaby loser he was at first. And he just doesn't like Shirahoshi for the same reason as well. But one thing about Luffy is that he also hates when you take away people's freedom. And so the celestial dragons are the ultimate combination of both. Charlos, a coward loser who robs people of their freedom. We've seen Luffy time and time again understand that if he wants to force his will and change upon the world, he's gonna have to do it with his fist. Pretty much every single time Luffy saves another nation, it's never through negotiation. Instead, it's by brute force, blowing up the entire situation completely. So it's only natural for the members of the Monkey D family to despise the disgusting celestial dragons who can't even fight for their beliefs. They can't even fight for their ideologies or even their lifestyle. Everything is handed to them on a silver platter, and people like Luffy and Garp are expected to not do anything simply because of their holy status and traditions. And so what we can see here is that the Monkey D family shows two trends. They're simply just built different, and number two, they're destined to face celestial dragons. And this brings us into the inevitable Straw Hat and Revolutionary Alliance. Oda's already showed us alliances before, but for this one, he's set the stage completely, like a chessboard, and the way the pieces have been moved around and set up for Luffy and Dragon's alliance is quite amazing when you look at everything pointing in this direction. First off, we have Nico Robin, the flame or light of the revolution. While to the world, Nico Robin is a demon child, shunned and wanted for simply existence, and Dragon was the one person who always sought after her. For decades after his friend Professor Clover had perished in Ohara, he would spend the next years looking for Nico Robin, who carried on the will of Ohara. And this once again goes back to Roger's quote, inherited wills, dreams, the ebb and flow of the ages. As long as people pursue freedom, these things will never cease to exist. With Dragon carrying on Ohara's will and Robin being both a revolutionary and a straw hat, this is the first place of evidence that tells me it's only a matter of time before the army unites with the Straw Hats. It's also interesting to think that Robin has spent more time with the revolutionaries than Luffy and the Straw Hat pirates, so Robin is truly integral to both crews. She is the key to exposing the true history to the world. Luffy wants to find the One Piece, while Dragon wants to expose the celestial dragons and learn the truth, and Robin can help out both as a centerpiece. Next we have Sabo, Luffy's brother, saved by Dragon of the Revolution. It almost seems like fate. At this point, I truly believe that Sabo has the will of D, just like the Gorosei speculated in chapter 1086. Sabo's already friends with Nico Robin, and so with a relationship like this, it's really only a matter of time before we now see the relationship between father and son come together. And speaking of Sabo, Luffy still doesn't know what happened at the Reverie. He was so ready to charge into Marijoa and help Vivi before Zoro stepped in, and so ultimately I see this moment as simply foreshadowing a great setup for Luffy to eventually invade Marijoa, because when he actually learns about the truth about Vivi Vivi and Cobra from Sabo, or the world government and Celestial Dragons do something even crazier to piss him off. The first time Luffy came across the Celestial Dragon, he was disgusted, and despite the warnings not to do anything, he just couldn't resist punching Charlos in the face at the slave auction in Sabaody. It was a natural instinct and reaction, a natural disgust at this pathetic false god. And so at a certain point, Luffy's not going to care what people tell him, he's just going to run straight into Marijoa and go at their head. Luffy is also now a Yonko, and being a Yonko means that when the world government attacks Luffy at Egghead, they are declaring war against him and his entire crew and the abundance of allies that he has. So tying in the declaration of war and the element of Vivi and Cobra, who are his friends, after finally knowing the truth, it'll be finally time to charge into Marijoa and continue this war that the world government has already started. You have to think about it this way, Vivi's already essentially a straw hat, and Imu's leading his forces to find Vivi. We know Luffy takes you messing with his friends extremely personal, like in Water 7 and Enos Lobby, so I think people expect the Straw Hats need to visit Laugh Tale and see the One Piece first to spark the invasion of Marijoa after learning the truth. But knowing Luffy's nature, he doesn't need any type of information on the history of the world government to charge into Marijoa. I'm not saying it has to happen a certain way, but I'm just saying we should keep an open mind, because Oda has already stated that the One Piece will be at the very end of the series. All Luffy needs to attack the Celestial Dragons is a reason to help his friends and find a good fight. We already have an example of Luffy declaring war, and it was just to save Robin. And now seeing Sai and Leo murder Charlos and scream for everyone to hear, that's on Gang, that's on Straw Hat Grand Fleet, we're seeing more and more hints pointing towards Luffy versus the world government being set up to face. Cobra's dying words to Sabo was to tell Luffy and Vivi that they are members of the D-Clan, so this is another way that Oda has set up Sabo and Dragon to meet up with Luffy and Vivi. And this is because I believe that Vivi will rejoin the Straw Hat Pirates, because in her heart she's essentially already a Straw Hat, and she's not strong, so Luffy will have to protect her. Another way to tie Luffy and Dragon into an alliance is through Bonney, as she could also be involved here, now becoming Luffy's ally during Egghead and this entire Buster Call situation. And with Kuma being a revolutionary, there's another reason for both parties to meet up. I'm also pretty sure that Bonney has met Dragon at some point, similar to how she met Vegapunk before, and I like to think that Kuma was the former right-hand man to Dragon before Sabo and before he left the army to become a warlord and join Vegapunk. I could see Bonney becoming a revolutionary, following in the footsteps of her father, once she understands the truth about Kuma and Vegapunk's history. And since Sabo helped to save Kuma from Marijoa during the reverie, she now trusts the revolutionaries more than ever. So I really do think that Bonney will join the revolutionaries, because as Kuma's daughter, she'll be welcomed in with open arms. But how will this all play out? How will Bonney join the revolutionaries? Well, this leads me to my biggest prediction for the finale of Egghead. I think the start of Luffy and Dragon's alliance will be at the very end of Egghead when Luffy finally meets his father. Dragon will show up at the very end, similar to how Shanks did during Marineford. Everyone always wonders, how on earth did the red-haired pirates get there so fast at the perfect timing at the very last second as Shanks clashes with the Kainu? Shanks is a Yonko and he's fast, and he was booking it across the world. But if anyone's faster than Shanks, it may be Dragon, the Storm Logia. The man is fast as lightning and wind itself. Dragon pulling up to Egghead bringing an entire storm with him would be the most hype scene ever, and arguably more hype than Shanks' moment at Marineford. He could arrive at the very tail end, right on time to help Luffy and his old friend Vegapunk escape. There's been a great foreshadowing to this as well. For example, during Egghead, we get a significant amount of hints of Monkey D. Dragon being involved with this arc. First, Vegapunk as Shaka talking to Dragon early in the arc, telling him that he will die soon. Next, we see Dragon and Vegapunk's mini flashback to Ohara. Third, there's Kuma, who's also tying both. Since the revolutionaries are already at war with the world government, I could even see Dragon show up simply to face his enemy here head on. And I also think it's possible that we see a Holy Knight alongside Saturn. Once Dragon arrives at the scene to finish off the escape, the way I see Luffy meeting his father for the first time playing out is with Luffy and Dragon both picking their nose. Then they clash and we finally get to see Dragon's devil fruit revealed in text after 25 years. While Dragon might be a lot more serious in nature, especially compared to Joyboy, the Straw Hats and revolutionaries will see their own similarities. You have to remember, Luffy's idea of an alliance is so much different from an actual idea of an alliance. For him, it's just someone that's his friend. For example, we saw with Law, they had completely different ideas of an alliance, but it all worked out in the end, and the same could be said for him and Sabo if they teamed up. In Luffy's eyes, Ivankov, Sabo, Nico Robin, even Kuma, they're all like friends to him. Now, at one point when Luffy and Dragon do invade Marijoa and take down the Celestial Dragons, I always envisioned a scene where Luffy, Garp, and Dragon are standing up against the 5 Gorosei facing them together. But eventually, I think that Luffy will have to move on to Imu or Blackbeard, and that will leave Garp or Dragon to face against a Gorosei, or maybe even both together. Eventually, I expect that Sabo and Zoro will also join in on the fight, fight, Zoro to face the Gandhi, Venus, Judo, Godosei, and Sabo to get a rematch that he deserves as well. Finally being able to go all out in a fair 1v1, not against Imu and 5 Godosei at the same time. The idea of Garp facing a Godosei will just be so hype, getting the old man versus old man matchup. And then my final pick to face one of the final Godosei members would be Law or Rayleigh. Or maybe Dragon ends up defeating 2 Godosei at once, which would be extremely hype. This alliance could restore the monkey family to the throne. It's like Doflamingo says, whose good and evil always flips back and forth. It's possible the D-Clan and Celestial Dragons have a history of fighting for power. At one point the Marines may have been seen as the enemies in comparison to the pirates, because in Wano we even see them compare the pirates and Marines together. But I can see Luffy either restoring the D-Clan to the leaders of the new world that he creates, or even better, Luffy as Joyboy may even finish off this entire cycle completely, where Luffy might differ from the previous Joyboys, that he could be the final person to make a new era without prophecy, creating a new future without a cycle, which fits the themes of freedom and piracy, with Luffy being the key to a future that is a new uncharted adventure completely. The one thing on my wish list for the final saga is that Bonney ages up Garp into his prime, because even if it's only for a single fight against a Godosei or against a Kainu, that would just be incredible. Because seeing Prime Luffy, Prime Dragon, and Prime Garp all fighting together, a prime trio of the world's most powerful fighters, would honestly be the greatest moment ever. Please Oda, just please let Bonney use her powers on an old man like Garp so we can see the Garp D fist in action. And Garp is the one guy who's always bringing up his past glory days, the man who's always constantly bragging about his prime, so there's no one more fitting to give this moment to than the old hero. And this would also be so hype, as it could be the key to the moment which inspires all those Marines to switch sides and join him, like I mentioned earlier, starting a civil war. If the Marines knew that Prime Garp had returned, they'd hop on the bandwagon just for the simple fact of believing in this man's greatness. Whitebeard once mentioned a great war that was to come one day, and there's no doubt in my mind that this war will be led by Luffy, Dragon, and Garp, father and sons, 3 generals of the Monkey D family, immortalizing the Monkey D family's name into history once again as bringers of needed change. While I'm truly excited to see the Monkey D fam go ape and impact the future in a powerful way, what's just as important is this family's legendary past. So what is it that makes this family so special in the first place? How are all 3 of these men complete ghosts in their own right? What is their family's history? Well, it's time to reveal everything. You see, I believe that the Monkey D family is of a royal bloodline. We're talking about One Piece here, and in One Piece, kings and conquerors are usually determined by strength. It's in their nature to go against the Celestial Dragon. So is this a curse of some kind, something all Will of D members subconsciously succumb to? Or you could argue this reaction also has something to do with their conquering kingly nature. But ultimately, for the Monkey D fam specifically, I think it's a bit of both. Just like Charlos and the Celestial Dragons are clinging to the very narrow history of the world and clinging to the traditions and descendants of the gods despite being weak, the other side could be true for Luffy and his family's history being erased from the world, with the Monkey D family holding up their customs to their powerful actions and their insane nature instead of using laws, traditions, and status during the era of Celestial Dragons. That makes these men true pillars of revolution, and this all leads to the secret Shandora history of the Monkey D family and why they're so important and connected to Joyboy. And some of this I guarantee you would have never even imagined being possible. Most people might say that Luffy comes from a lineage of Joyboy's ancestors, and I do think it's possible, but I actually don't think it's the case, and you'll understand why soon enough. But before getting to that, we need to go over the inspiration for the Monkey D family. Alright, so it's clear that Oda was inspired by many things for Luffy's character, Dragon Ball, Sun Wukong, and Hanuman, because let's just say that Joyboy was a Monkey D family member. Just like the Gold D family, you would think the world government would go through the entire world to eradicate this family line, and when they shown back up again with Garp, Luffy, and Dragon, you would think they would also go after them. And this leads me into Oda's inspiration for Luffy's character, Dragon Ball, Sun Wukong, and Hanuman. Looking back at the very early chapters of One Piece, there's clear similarities to early OG Dragon Ball, but even more so focusing on Luffy as his name is Monkey D. Luffy, it's clear that he was inspired by the origins of Goku at least a little, as Goku was shown in Jump's iconic Monkey Boy. But going even deeper, Dragon Ball, at least before it was about alien invasions and fighting gods of destruction, was a simple parody gag manga of Journey to the West. So Luffy was inspired by Goku, and Goku was inspired by Sun Wukong. As One Piece progressed, we begin to see a lot more of how Oda began to be inspired by both, and Sun Wukong is notoriously compared to Luffy because just like despite Monkey D. Luffy's will becoming Pirate King, Sun Wukong was known as the Monkey King. In One Piece we have the D-Clan or the enemy of the gods, but in Journey to the West, Monkey King Sun Wukong rivaled the gods in his own way. Sun Wukong is like a classic shonen story about reaching the highest highs and enlightenment. And in One Piece, I would say the Straw Hats are also seeking enlightenment and all in their own ways. And with their captain being Joyboy, it wasn't more apparent than Luffy being enlightened when transforming into Gear 5. But arguably the most important is Hanuman, because he has the resemblance of a divine monkey god and is revered as the Wisdom King. The biggest connection with him and Luffy is that it ties them to essentially being monkey kings, but also the monkey family members of Hanuman, which is comparable to the entire Monkey D family line. And shout out to all the Indians that subscribed to me, because months ago I met up with the Indian One Piece community and I have to say that experience was welcoming. Apparently Hanuman can shapeshift, he can change his form, and this reminds me of Luffy in Gear 5 or in all his gear forms, but really specifically with Gear 5 as he battles with Kaido and goes into many different forms. For example, how Luffy can grow into a giant and even shrink into a chibi form. But it doesn't stop here, because Luffy's attack in Gear 5, the Badgering Gun, is a reference to Hanuman meaning Monkey God Gun. And by the way, Badgering Gun is Luffy's best finisher in the entire series. Another little detail is that in the Hindu religions, many speculate that some of the inspiration for Zunisha comes from Gunisha, an elephant god. Now tying Hanuman back into the monkey family as a whole, Hanuman is the son of Vayu, the god of wind and air. And like we discussed earlier, Dragon has the storm fruit and wind powers. Hanuman once ate the sun, thinking it was a fruit, just like Luffy ate the sun god Nika fruit. And there's so much more evidence and great videos out there that explain Luffy's connections to Hanuman and Sun Wukong, like Flying Panda, Threevil, and Ohara. So I'll make sure to leave them in the description. So now that you've seen this, I think you can see where I'm really going with this, because the monkey family is definitely special because they are One Piece's versions of the monkey god family. And so special in fact that the Shandorans even believe that Joyboy would be reborn into the family. And that just gives me goosebumps. What all of this means is that the ancient people could predict certain events through visions or prophecies. And this is even more important because we know Oda knew many prophecies about Joyboy returning to Wano in exactly 20 years. So when looking at Shandora and its ancient text all around the city, unlike any other place in One Piece, it makes you wonder what other mysteries could have been foreshadowed or even completely solved by spending more time looking at the ancient artifacts. It seems these ancient artifacts tell more than just about the past, but also the future. Just like the Neptune family line is important, as there's prophecies of a mermaid princess being reborn as Poseidon. I believe that even if Oda doesn't blatantly spell it out for us, we can put these pieces together to see that the Monkey D family is in a similar situation. And there's other characters that may be reincarnations that aren't really confirmed yet, like for example maybe Vivi and Lily. And if you still think that fate, destiny, time travel, and prophecies ruin One Piece's story, well, I completely disagree, because many correlate these things to Luffy not being free, but that's not the case at all. You see, there's a few ways to look at this. First, Luffy still had to become the man he is. Having the best genes isn't enough, and I would argue that Big Mom had the best genes for any human in One Piece. But then there's also the idea of seeing the future with Future Sight and Madame Charlie using a magical crystal ball. Well, what this means is that we may actually be witnessing Luffy's story play out in real time. And from our perspective, the story is continuously moving forward. But you see, in retrospect, if we look back at Luffy's adventures as one long story, that's only from the point of view that we have with it being a weekly shonen series. You see, in retrospect, when we look back at Luffy's adventures one day as one long story that's already played out, viewing this story from the past or the future, it doesn't change the fact that Luffy had to do it. For example, if you're witnessing a specific event from the past, this means that this event already happened in the future, similarly to how an event already happened in the past when we look back at the past. People oftentimes try to separate time, but if you view it as one long timeline, we have to look at the past and the future times through a similar lens of history, whether it be a past history or a history in the future that Luffy's already accomplished. This way, Luffy still did everything himself, but there was just a few members who could see this. And I started believing this idea with One Piece when you consider how important the future is. And really, the future is only a further future's history. It just depends from where you're standing in time and where you look at it. The current timeline of One Piece is a future timeline's past. In other words, if Toki jumped 50 years into the future, she'd see Luffy's actions that we're currently witnessing as that future's history, as it would have already played out. But why Luffy is truly the chosen one to defy destiny is because he's already proven this in fights like with Katakuri. The entire point of Luffy's fight with Katakuri and Future Sight is that Luffy can change the future, because Luffy looks into the future and changes the future that Katakuri saw, which means that he changed it. And this was on a minuscule scale, but putting it on a much larger scale, and since Luffy is the main character, it means that Luffy still has the power to make drastic changes for the future. Rayleigh himself believes in Luffy because of this, and I think that even if Rayleigh knows what will happen because he saw the One Piece, the reason why Luffy is the man that Roger's waiting for is is because Luffy's will is so powerful that this is the man who can change fate and the future itself. And so it's possible that it's even Luffy's dream to become the pirate king or the freest man because his goal is to have full freedom one day, full control of his actions, and the ability to dictate his own fate fully. And that's why Gear 5 is so important to him becoming an enlightened being, as he understands the cost of freedom and he understands the concept that freedom ain't free. Now, going back to the Monkey King idea, I'll finally reveal why the Monkey D family were the previous rulers of Shandora. You see, in One Piece, people worship gods, but with my theory that the Monkey D family are an ancient royalty, you have to ask ourselves, how did they become royalty in the first place? Sure, a part of this can be from powerful wills and kingly nature. What if I told you that the Monkey D family are so recognized in the Void Century because they were the family that raised Joyboy after taking him in as an orphan and raising him at a young age? The Monkey D family was the one who transformed Joyboy into a warrior of liberation. And because Joyboy would go on to become such a legendary warrior, this gave Shandora real royal status, as Joyboy would be known throughout the ancient kingdom as an orphan raised by this warrior family. And with Joyboy being a sun god, it makes sense that the Monkey D family would be considered godly as well by the Shandorans. Oda's favorite trend is for important characters to be abandoned by their fathers and for their parents to die in a tragic backstory, so I don't see why the original Joyboy story would be any different. Luffy never knew his father, same with Ace, and we can assume the same with Shanks, as he was found in a treasure chest at God Valley. And there's Whitebeard's entire character, which is adopting and raising young men that he finds like Marco, Blackbeard, and becoming their father. Nami never knew her family, and then her adopted mother tragically dies. Robin never spent time with her father or mother, and then her mother also dies. Usopp's father is still looking for milk at Elbaf, and then there's Zoro's parents who supposedly also died, and Sanji who ran away from his own bloodline and considers Zeph his true adopted father. Oda loves this storytelling device for whatever reason, and he's shown this reoccurring trend in the story of One Piece for adopted children raised by their non-biological parents. And so I believe that Shandora was once a lost relic which was once part of the ancient kingdom before it was separated. And this would also explain why there was so much gold there and why the city of Shandora has casual ancient kingdom style writings engraved in their buildings in the very same language as the poneglyphs in chapter 272, because they're heavily connected to Joyboy. And I think it's one of the most overlooked and crazy reveals that we got from Skypiea, and we'll also be getting more into the gold and its importance at the very end of the video because there's more than you could have ever realized. If you know our Oars Is Joyboy theory, you'll know that there is so much evidence to Joyboy being an ancient giant. And crazy enough, in the Skypiea arc, there's a map that shows a giant Oni on the map, but we never saw any kind of giants in the arc, with the map being at least 400 years old and maybe much older. It's possible that the giant is Joyboy as he climbed up the giant beanstalk just like Jack in the Beanstalk stories. If you look at many of the ruins and the Vor statue, they resemble an Oars-like beast. There seems to be an Oars in the altar of Shandora in Nolan's flashback as well. Oda also gave us another hint to the monkey family being connected to Shandora in the early Jaya arc, where we see these two characters who are essentially monkey men searching for Jaya with Nolan's ancestors. What a coincidence, these are the first characters that we meet in the Jaya arc or the Skypiea saga. As Rayleigh says it, no coincidences exist in this world. Is it possible that these monkey men are descendants of the Monkey D family or somehow related, making them some of Luffy's long lost cousins? Oda wants us to know about the importance of the symbolism of monkeys from the very beginning. And tying back into the Joyboy theories of Shandora, we even see Nika battling a snake on a golden hieroglyph. I personally believe it's Nika because we saw that Nika had a sword in his silhouette, so he may have fought one of the giant snakes that we know exists in Shandora at some point. And I guess it could be any warrior really, but considering these people worship the snake as a sun god, this might explain why, as it may have been lost in translation over time, with this warrior being the true sun god. I also just think that the Monkey D family raising an orphan who was a previous Joyboy during the Void Century would be perfect tying the entire story of One Piece together, with Luffy a Monkey D family member hundreds of years later being Joyboy as well. It's also more interesting than the original Joyboy simply being a member of the Monkey D family lineage directly. Similar to how Goku was being raised by a family that's not his race, the original Joyboy may have had a similar backstory. And with Oars not being a Monkey D technically, it would explain why Luffy's family is not as feared and prosecuted with the Celestial Dragons and world government. Instead, we see in arcs like Punk Hazard from Law that the world government fears and seeks the power to resurrect and control the Oars giants instead of facing them in battle. To me, it's almost too destined by fate and kind of boring if Luffy is the same bloodline as the original Joyboy. Instead, if we look at the Oars clan and the entire Oni race, I believe they were wiped out by the world government during the Void Century War out of pure fear of another potential Joyboy appearing one day. This would also explain why Kaido and Oni was so obsessed with Joyboy and his Oni heritage, and maybe even why King believed his captor captain was Joyboy. And since Oars had the human fruit as the OG Joyboy, it would also explain why the Straw Hat is so massive, as he would be a lot smaller in his human Nika fruit form, as we've seen that Luffy can enlarge and shrink his body into a giant or a chibi form. What if Goldie Roger and Rayleigh realized the importance of the Monkey D family when he saw Joyboy at Laugh Tale? For example, Wizard of Voice once had a theory that tells the story of Laugh Tale, describing Joyboy as a monkey. It would be a shocking twist when Luffy is laughing at the story and Robin and the other crew members are staring at Luffy with an insane look, as they realize that Luffy is the monkey, or in other words, Luffy is the Joyboy that is on the story of Laugh Tale. And so maybe that's why Goldie Roger really wanted Monkey D. Garp to be the one to raise Ace. After all, Goldie Roger believed that maybe Ace could be Joyboy, since he said that Ace would be the one to find the One Piece. So Roger may have been trying to force a similar backstory to the original Joyboy being raised by the Monkey D family. And tying everything back to Rayleigh, Roger is now dead, so maybe this is why Rayleigh believes that Luffy is Joyboy, because now he sees the bigger picture. He likes Luffy because he sees Luffy as someone who changes fate, because since Rayleigh also knows about the future of Joyboy, and maybe also the connections and importance with the Monkey D family as well, similar to Roger. Putting two and two together, after spending a few years with Luffy, he may have realized that Luffy truly is the man that Roger's waiting for. And there's even more evidence to prove that Rayleigh realized Luffy is Joyboy, because when Luffy first meets Rayleigh, the Dark King says, "That hat fits a fearless man like you. I've always wanted to meet you." Then in chapter 603, Rayleigh began reminiscing about the first time he met Goldie Roger. Roger calls their meeting a fated encounter of destiny, and it gets absolutely crazy when Rayleigh, after remembering this, says maybe destiny goes on its plotting way. There's no coincidences in the world. Yet Luffy has grown into a man even more worthy of that hat than Roger. This is wild considering we would later see Roger and Rayleigh's journey to Laugh Tale through Oden's flashback, and in this flashback they learn all about Joyboy, and they learn about the future prophecies and both the past and future Joyboys, and they learn about the original owner of the Straw Hat all those years ago. And we know this because we saw Emu staring at the giant Straw Hat in the freezer with Luffy's poster in his hand. And then Luffy is now finally confirmed to be Joyboy by Zunisha. So now when we look back at what Rayleigh says, even more worthy of that hat than Roger, you can see that Oda was foreshadowing and showing us that Rayleigh, after his 2 years spent with Luffy, fully believed that Luffy would surpass Roger and be even more deserving of that hat than his captain, because he realized that Luffy is Joyboy, as Joyboy is the true symbol of the Straw Hat. And what's even crazier is that Rayleigh talks about no coincidences existing, but Luffy is also known as Straw Hat. I mean, how much more perfect does it get? This dude is the Straw Hat Luffy, known throughout the entire world through this moniker. So of course he's more worthy than Roger and Shanks. I just wish that we could have seen Rayleigh's revelations and reactions to all of this.
初めて会った時、俺に何て言ったか覚えてるか。
回をひっくり返すだったが、
この出会いは運命だ。
Monkey D. Garp, who was respected by Goldie Roger, also seems to share a resemblance with the Shandian chief, as he has the dog hoodie in the very first appearance and even looks a lot like the design for the chiefs when we see Whitebeard in the Skypiea arc. So once again maybe hinting at the Monkey D family possibly being an important family of this land. And it also makes you wonder, have Garp and Dragon ever been to Shandora? I mean, if Dragon can fly around or even become wind itself, I wouldn't be surprised if he went up there at one point, especially considering his face tattoo feels very tribal and similar to the tattoos that we've seen on characters like Whitebeard. Really early on in the video, I explained how I believe the Monkey D family were the only family of the D clan to survive the purge of the D. Makes sense that most Ds were wiped out as they lost the war to the Celestial Dragons during the Void Century. But we can also see that if the Monkey D family were royal kings and godly figures of Shandora, that they also were almost wiped out. And we know this because in chapter 272, Robin explains how the city of Shandora was destroyed in a war. She says that the city's books were all burnt and the city's history was erased. Well, what does this remind you of? That's right, the Void Century, proving that Shandora's history was specifically important and erased by Celestial Dragons during the war against the Ancient Kingdom. Robin says that there's no doubt the city once fought against the enemy, and she theorized that the Golden City of Shandora was ruined in the service of protecting the Poneglyph. And she says at the height of its prosperity, insinuating that the Ancient Kingdom was extremely prosperous and a powerful kingdom. Now the Monkey D fam, if anyone, as a family of warriors with extremely powerful wills and resolve would be the one family to survive and keep Shandora alive. While many of the city was destroyed, we do still have it around. In chapter 1085, Imu mentions how the D once opposed the celestial dragons and speaks of the D as if they were eradicated. For example, Imu tells Cobra how none of these remaining D members know the true meaning of D and its importance. Well, this doesn't seem to really add up. For starters, why is Cobra asking Imu and the Gorosei about the D? This implies that Lily, who existed during the Void Century, even she didn't know the meaning of the D. Otherwise, she would have explained what it was in the letter that was passed down to Cobra. It very well could be that D is dawn, and that's what she was trying to hint at in the letter. But if it's something so simple and obvious, why not just spell it out completely? And so this is where I began to look deeper into this chapter, where I discovered something massive. You see, in this chapter, Oda gives us this funny little gag, Sa-di-bo, with Ace and Luffy giving Sabo the will of the initial. But what if I told you this was a major key? Because I believe that Sabo in this chapter was actually meant to very purposely parallel and symbolize Lily. You see, Sabo grew up with his brothers Luffy and Ace. However, Sabo was originally a member of a royal family. And this is the first parallel that I believe shows the similarities between Lily and Sabo, who are both featured in this chapter. Lily was a royal member and who would have become a celestial dragon, while Sabo was also a royal member of a high status elite family. Sabo teaming up with two D members, Luffy and Ace. And I believe Lily betrayed the celestial dragons after realizing that she chose the wrong side. After the world government wiped out the D clan, and I'm assuming her friend, the great warrior of liberation, Joyboy. The reason Imu suspected Lily of having the D was through her mistakes, releasing the poneglyphs to the entire world, intentionally betraying the celestial dragons. Now if we go back to Ace and Luffy making Sabo a D member, I've theorized that this scene is telling us that the will of D can be passed down to other people, but only by other D members. In the past there may have been some grand ritual, or maybe it was as simple as a simple sake ritual, but regardless, this theory became even more likely after chapter 1086, because even the Gorosei are speculating that Sabo is a D member as he is naturally tied to many D members by fate. And so after Queen Lily realized that she chose the wrong side and regretted defeating Joyboy, she met up with the few remaining D clan members who did survive the war. This is where the Monkey D family comes in, because I believe a surviving member of the Monkey D family inducted Lily and her lineage as a new family of the D clan to help carry on the clan's ideals. I believe they chose her after they realized that she truly stood with them, releasing the poneglyphs to the entire world. And a quick little side note, but I really do believe that Lily had the pawpaw fruits, and this was how she went missing after she disappeared in the blink of an eye through the pawpaw powers, and this was also how she dispersed the poneglyphs. In a literal and symbolic sense now, Lily is inheriting the will of D and carrying it on to the future generation. And after this, Lily and these few remaining D members may have chosen the next families to induct to the D clan. Like maybe she chose the Go family and the Trafalgar family, looking for survivors who would honor Joyboy's legacy. She may have spent her final days helping the D clan as much as she could. This theory works on the premise that someone from the D clan had to survive, and who better than a legendary Monkey D general like an ancient Luffy or Garp like man? Or maybe the reason why no one knows the true meaning of the D is because the only survivor of the D clan at that time was actually a young D member, like a young boy from the D clan who didn't even know the truth about the meaning. Now see, if you think about it, if Luffy earns the title of king, it's very possible that the previous Joyboy of the past was also a king. I've spoken about it for a couple years now, but I believe the ancient kingdom was a kingdom of pirates, and that would explain the gold that was in Shandora, because after all, what's a pirate paradise without a bunch of golden riches? Same way Wano was also most likely once allied or part of the ancient kingdom as the land of gold, and the place where the poneglyphs are written. I believe this pirate land was a place of freedom, and a place where people who seek liberty could exist, a pirate haven or pirate paradise. And so my theory that Luffy's dream is to create a pirate paradise was furthered when Blackbeard refers to a pirate kingdom as his dream. I think it was the hint that Blackbeard's dream is the same as Luffy's, a pirate paradise as well, but of course it would be a different vision for this pirate kingdom, and I'll leave a link to where I talk about this more, about Blackbeard and Luffy's dream. I also believe that this was Roger's dream, and Luffy's vision is closer to where Roger dreamed of, where Blackbeard most likely has a similar vision for his kingdom as Zebek. That also adds to Roger saying that he wishes he could see Joyboy's era, as Roger is the most pirated character in the world as the Pirate King. But this Joyboy era that he speaks of is both Luffy's new pirate era and the original Joyboy's era of the past, which is why Luffy is the man that Roger's waiting for. The land of pirates would be directly opposing the world government. The world government paints pirates as villains and evil devils for simply existing, because becoming a pirate is seeking freedom. As we explained through Roger's freedom quote when Dragon brings it up, he says, A pirate, not a bad idea. And this brings up another point. What exactly is the Jolly Roger? The Jolly Roger is the skull and crossbones. So what if Joyboy was the one who created the first ever Jolly Roger? And then now every Jolly Roger that we see today is a pirate ritual that carries on Joyboy's will. And if Joyboy's Jolly Roger was the pirate flag, it may have been also the flag of the ancient kingdom. Lily says to bring back the flag of the dawn, which will make Luffy's Straw Hat Jolly Roger the new era's flag of the dawn. It's a very common theory that the original Joyboy is where the Straw Hat originates from, as we see Emu looking at the giant straw hat in the freezer while holding Luffy's bounty poster. It's interesting because Alabas's flag is also a sun flag. Also, I believe that Joyboy is the dawn itself because Toki's quote during Wano says that you are the moon unaware of the dawn, and on this channel we believe that Wano is the moon and Luffy is the dawn. Wano being the moon, as the clans of Wano have the moon in their name, with the Tsukis like Kozuki and Amatsuki, and Hiyori being the moon princess. Luffy is the dawn because he's the sun god, bringing back the era of dawn and light to Wano after these 20 years of darkness. And on a larger scale, you could expand this riddle to the entire world, because once Luffy becomes Pirate King, and we see that pirate kingdom that Luffy always dreamed of, this will bring the dawn to the entire world. If you liked anything I said here in this video, make sure to leave a like, and check out this video where we explain the entire Oars Is Joyboy mega theory.